Also, if you fail to make your installment payments or your financing falls through, you're screwed. You do not get your deposit back. Today, a question and answer video where I answer the questions you've asked me. Hello everyone, this is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate and Remax Realtron Realty Inc. As always, you can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. Feel free to go into the description, find my contact info, ask me any questions you may have with regards to any topics covered in this video, topics covered in other videos. And also feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review if you happen to enjoy this video or if you just generally happen to enjoy the content I make and find it informative. But as I always say this, you're not obliged to do so whatsoever. Feel free not to subscribe, not to comment. Do as you wish, but if you happen to enjoy my videos and find them informative, it's much appreciated. But anyways, let's get to the point of today's video, which is a question and answer video where I answer your questions you've asked me either via Gmail, via Instagram, or on my YouTube. Last week or maybe 2 weeks ago, I put up a post in my community tab that maybe you saw, maybe you didn't see, asking for your questions. Basically gonna answer those questions in this video. As always, you can find the timestamps in the comments and probably in the description as well. Feel free to skip around, and going forward, if I make another post asking for your questions, I'm trying to do this maybe once a month, maybe bi-weekly. We'll see how it goes, but point is, I am going to do more Q&A videos. And going forward, don't be shy. Ask your questions and try to make them as specific as possible. Anyways, enough of all that. Let's get to the first question. Question number one, what are the cons of buying pre-construction house/condo? Very good question. There are many cons associated that a lot of people, potentially novice buyers or people who are not involved in the market whatsoever, there are a lot of cons that people are not aware of. Now, a lot of these cons I will list more so have to do with condo pre-construction properties. They either don't exist with freehold pre-cons, or if they do, they exist to a lesser extent. Starting out, there's this misconception that pre-cons are cheaper than resale, and that misconception is mostly due to, I think, advertising and maybe some agents saying that, generally speaking. I mean, it's something I believed even before becoming an agent myself. That's not the case, you know. So I guess the first con, we can say that pre-cons are going to cost you a little bit more than resale. The hope is that when you're buying the pre-con, yes, it is a little costlier than resale at that moment in time, but 4 years down the line, when you're closing it and when you're occupying it, whether once again it's 4 years with, you know, apartments and condominium pre-cons, or if it's a year to 2 years down the line with freehold pre-cons, whatever the case is, the hope is when you close, then it will be cheaper than resale. And that's a natural segue to waiting period, depending on the type of pre-con, once again, and whether you're talking about detached pre-cons, freehold, the townhome freehold pre-cons, all the way to, you know, 56-story high-rise pre-cons in Midtown Toronto, downtown Toronto, North York, Richmond Hill. But you're looking at a period of 1 to 4 years. And if you do not have family to live with, or maybe you do, but you don't want to live with family in that duration, and if you're renting, that's 3 to 4 years of costs that you have to account for in your financing. That is to say, if you're currently paying $1,900 a month for rent and your options are a resale or a pre-con that's going to be completed, let's say in 3 years, if you choose to go with the pre-con for whatever reason, maybe you love the project, maybe you love the area, you find it exciting, you're not quite ready to buy a resale now, you have to calculate for those 3 years of rent that you have to pay, which is pretty much a sunk cost. Another con, and once again more so associated with pre-con condos, is that you don't really have that many guarantees and assurances that what you see in the marketing material will actually come to fruition. Now, the chances are, if you're working with a well-established builder such as Menkes, Tridel, most likely than not, what you see on the marketing material and what you'll end up getting. What you'll end up getting will be 90 to 95% of what you saw in the marketing material, in the floor plans, in the images and the illustrations of the exterior, of the common areas. You are most likely going to get what you saw. And with less established, less trustworthy, middle to lower builders, that variance of what you will get versus what you saw on the page, that variance is larger, right? And that's a risk you're taking. Next up, another con is that you do not have that much leverage with the builder. You cannot negotiate per unit prices. It is as listed. You either pay that or you do not. For 99.9% of the population, you're not negotiating condo prices. Also, if you fail to make your installment payments or your financing falls through, you're screwed. You do not get your deposit back, right? In resale, you do. With pre-con condos, you're not getting your deposit or the money you've put in back if your financing falls through for whatever reason. And then, of course, there's occupancy costs, right? So once you occupy the pre-con unit, like let's say you buy it today and it's going to be completed in 2023. 2023 comes, you get the keys, you have the keys, you can sleep in the unit right there in that moment, but it has not closed with the city. It has not been incorporated as a legal condominium corporation. And the gap between you get the keys and you can occupy it until the point in time where it legally closes and you close with the builder, that occupancy period, you're paying rent to the builder. Now it's usually around average market rent or a little bit below market rent. It depends once again on the particular pre-con project. Point here is there's a lot of these hidden fees or not so hidden fees that a lot of people don't know are coming their way that can operate as a big con. Question 2, what are the average prices of townhomes in Toronto so far in summer of 2021? Well, I interpreted this question as summer 2021, so I put June 1st to August 29th. The date of recording of this video is actually August 30th. It might come out August 30th as well, but we only have the 29 full days of sales data. So when we look at townhome prices within the summer of 2021, we see an average sold price of 1.202 million based on 304 transactions. Now, although this wasn't in the question, I thought it would be interesting to break it down to 2-story townhomes versus 3-story townhomes in the same period, of course. 2-story townhomes in the same period, we have an average sold price of 1.131, whereas with 3-story townhomes, we have an average sold price of 1.214. And once again, keep in mind, this is from June 1st to August 29th, only in the city of Toronto. We're not counting for Mississauga, Brampton, Richmond Hill, Vaughan, Markham, not those areas, only in the municipality of Toronto. Now, in terms of breaking down the prices, the average across all townhome types is 1.2, as I stated earlier. And that mainly has to do with the fact that buyers, not just in the summer market, but in this year in entirety, did shift towards condos and townhomes because of the high competition and high price levels associated with semis and freeholds. And in a lot of cases, townhomes are actually better investments in the long run, in my opinion, than semi-detached properties. Now, once again, you always have to go on a case-by-case basis and be more precise and look at the specific community if that holds up. But at a large general level, I do believe townhomes do stand a better chance of appreciating in certain cases than semis. Now, in terms of the 3-story prices versus the 2-story prices, part of the explanation for this is the fact that newer townhomes, a lot of newer townhome developments are nowadays 3-story townhomes. So going back to the first question, a lot of the pre-con townhomes available on the market right now, you're looking at 3 stories. And as a result, that does impact the average prices here because you're dealing with a lot of newer 3-story townhomes versus less newer 2-story townhomes in terms of what's entered into the resale market. But that's not the entirety of the explanation. Generally, if you've worked with me or you've seen my videos in the past, I actually suggest people to stay away from 3-story townhomes at minimum for end user experience. But I do believe certain aspects of 3-story townhomes make it somewhat of a difficult resale. And the reason I bring up the fact that there are a lot of newer 3-story townhomes, this is common theme with most property types, but I would have to venture to say probably more than any other property type, townhomes are the most age sensitive. Given its attached nature, age impacts values of townhomes more. What are common misconceptions people make when they are evaluating their own homes? Also, what are common upgrades to a house that can bump up the value? I'll start with the misconceptions. There are several misconceptions, both general and specific. Starting with the specific side of misconceptions here, a lot of homeowners assume that just because they have a finished basement and the house down the street that's selling the property has an unfinished basement, that's just a deal breaker. They've won the basic comparative analysis there. Basically, that's just to say that a lot of homeowners overvalue the finished versus unfinished basement and how much that can impact value. Now, as a general rule, there is some veracity to that. Finished basements, when we're doing the comparative analysis, we do account for finished basements a little bit more, but there are a lot of buyers in the market that actually prefer unfinished. And that's because they would love to put their own touch on the basement. Now, that's more associated with taste. Buyers who are just looking only at the quantitative side, or not the qualitative side, the buyers who would love to put their own touch on the basement, they're more leaning toward the qualitative analysis. The quantitative, the real, numbers buyers, the real numbers analysis. When interest rates are low, it is typically better to buy homes with finished basements that are cost a little bit more than homes with unfinished basements, because the interest rates for mortgages are so low that if you account for the differences, it's cheaper than rates for loans that are provided for improvements, right? Because usually those rates are higher. However, speaking at a more general misconception that sellers have from my experience, and it's completely understandable. There's no judgment involved in this when I say this. I'm the same way with my property. My family is the same way with their property. It's just a human condition, really. But sellers tend to overvalue their own property and not always, but majority of the time, think their property is a bit better than the neighbor's property. And that's not to say they're always wrong. However, the basis for those feelings is not always based on facts. Usually they're reasoning with their emotions. And once again, there is no judgment involved there. It is a seller, it's a human being. We're all like that. And part of my job is to take the seller's expectations and do my best to match it with market trends. In some cases, exceed the seller's expectations, despite or in spite of the market trends. In terms of what can bump up the value around the edges, I would probably have to say carpets. If your property has a lot of carpets, it's carpeted downstairs, upstairs, with the exclusion of the basement. But let's say it's carpeted on the main floor and the bedrooms, replacing it with proper engineered hardwood really does help the property. It shows better, it sells better according to the numbers. Kitchens, more than any other aspect of the property, I would probably have to say is what takes the buyer's opinion over the top, or is what breaks the buyer's back if they love the rest of the property. Buyers, and once again for really good reason, right, really do put a lot of esteem into the kitchen, and that's what can really impact value. If your kitchen is not even necessarily bad, but maybe not as state of the art as the competition. Lastly, and this is sometimes easier said than done, but larger windows, right? Older properties don't really tend to have large windows. The windows are usually on the smaller side. Natural sunlight, especially if your exposure is on the western side and the southern side, if you can enlarge windows, once again, easier said than done, right? But if that's a possibility, that also impacts value greatly. Question number 4, and probably the hardest question on this list. Are condos overvalued? Now, this is very difficult to answer. As I stated in my post, please try to be specific as possible. So I'll bring some specificity. If you want me to answer it at a general large level, I don't even know if you're talking GTA Toronto, but just generally, are condos overvalued? I would probably have to lean towards saying no. Now let's break this question down a little bit more and elaborate upon it in terms of both time and space, right? Let's be more specific in terms of geographic area and define our boundaries there and what point in the market. Are we talking about from January 1st to August in the summer market, just this week, last month, in the last 3 years? What are we talking about? And when we look at precise areas such as Midtown versus downtown versus North York, let's start with downtown. Downtown is very volatile, but that's not the same as saying it's overvalued. Do not get me wrong. I've always said downtown is volatile and it's not for the faint of heart. If you're a downtown condo investor, you make the most money in the shortest period of time in downtown. You can also go on the red in the shortest period of time. But right now, downtown condo prices are creeping back up, close to all-time highs, not quite there yet. Even if we break it down into more specific, Bay Street corridor is on fire, as I stated in previous videos, and I'm looking at the numbers. I have many clients in Bay Street for buying and selling, and I'm very in tune with the numbers there. And condos there are very hot, and for good reason, because there's demand for it. But for instance, Entertainment District, not so much. Not to say it's bottoming out by any means, but it's just not keeping up with Bay Street corridor. But once we look at Midtown generally is somewhere I think is a little overvalued. A lot of the builds in Midtown, I'm not the biggest fan of. And when I say Midtown, I really have in mind the Yonge and Eglinton area and that, 2 kilometer radius there. Although Midtown is obviously bigger than that. I think it's a little oversaturated. I think the builds are not as good as people think. I think demand will wane and supply will not. Areas like in Richmond Hill, I think Richmond Hill, if anything, is a little undervalued right now. If people were as bullish on Richmond Hill condos as I am, it would be selling for much more. Question number 5 and the last question, and once again, I'm gonna do another one of these Q&As sometime down the line. I will make the post. Feel free to ask your questions, but let's finish up with question number 5, which is, do condo fees increase every year? What is it based on? And is there a limit on the increase? And this person put a lot of hashtags, hashtag Tesla owner, hashtag HVAC, that's good, Persian cats, and meow. So when it comes to condo fees, basically, I always tell my clients, and people who ask me, you have to realize really what a condominium is, and you'll have a better understanding of the fees. At the end of the day, a condominium is a condominium corporation. If they need to raise funds, one way they will do that is by, once again, raising your maintenance. Now, they're based on the assessed value of your unit in comparison to the totality of the entire building. So for example, if the value of your condominium equates to 5% of the total building, you're gonna pay 5% share of the maintenance. Increases also depend on the size of the reserve fund and how much expenses accrue during a given year. There are no limitations on the increase. Certain buildings, obviously, much older buildings, the more expenses they accrue or the more sudden expenses, such as, for instance, if your building is very close to the water and the P3 and P2 start flooding for whatever reason. I've actually experienced that on the listing side of things where I was trying to sell a condominium, and that condominium building, it was so close to Lake Ontario, it was on the waterfront, that the P3 levels and I believe there was a P4 as well, was flooding, and they had to have a generator running at all times, a pump to pump out the water. And obviously that's going to exponentially increase, right, your condominium fees. So anyways, that hopefully answers your questions. Thanks for submitting your questions. Feel free to do so in the future when I make another post asking for your questions. Always make your questions as specific as possible. This is Sam from SaberiSixRealEstate, Remax Realtron Realty. You can find my contact information in the description box with regards to my Gmail, my Instagram, and my office. As always, feel free to get in touch with me. Lastly, feel free to subscribe, comment, rate, and review. Your support in that regard is always greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe and stay tuned. Thank you.